Here we are again for our weekly catch up. Hi, my name's Andy Rice from SailJuice. I'm back at home in Winchester. Matt Sheahan from PlanetSail. Where are you today?
Well, I should be at home in Winchester, but I'm actually down here at Warsash, down on the south coast on the Hamble, because it's Wednesday night, and Wednesday night is Wednesday night racing night. And I had half a mind to actually sort of present this in my wetsuit, and then I sort of realised what a nasty image that would present. So I'm actually still dressed before we go out sailing.
One day it will happen. What are you going to be sailing?
My RS 400.
Lovely. And it's also the eve of the 80th anniversary of D-Day. So that in the UK is quite a big deal, especially where you are. So tell me what's going on there with that.
Yeah, it certainly is. As you say, it's the commemoration of the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and there's been all kinds of do's going on up and down the coast, particularly around here in Portsmouth, and where there was a flyby, we saw all kinds of. Actually, the Red Arrows turned up today, but here in Warsash, there will be, in fact, in about 5 or 6 minutes' time, there will be a parade down by the river, because the River Hamble played a very important part in D-Day. Because this is actually where some of those brave men headed off to cross the channel to head over to France. So a very special day indeed down here.
Yeah, a big part of our maritime legacy. But meanwhile, let's get back to what's been going on elsewhere in the world. And there's been some action across the pond in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Looked like horrendous weather for the first ever SailGP event there. 6 degrees water temperature. And I'm wondering if it's that 6 degrees water temperature and the horrendous conditions that contributed to the Emirates GBR actually winning. Giles Scott at the helm winning his first ever SailGP event.
Well, it certainly would have felt a bit more like home than Bermuda, where they were before, wouldn't it? Yeah, you do have to wonder, but you're right. It was pretty horrible conditions. Didn't seem to worry them at all, but the Brits put in a very solid performance over the weekend. They, spoiler alert here, if you haven't watched the highlights yet, but the Brits won. And they won on the final day. Obviously, the way SailGP works is that it is its races up until the final, 3-boat final. And Emirates Great Britain, steered by Giles Scott, did extremely well throughout the weekend and actually very much earned their place in the final. And when it came to the final, they delivered a very impressive performance right from the start. The start was one of the best I've seen for a while, actually. Absolutely spot on, and gained the margin he needed to get his team out in front. And they were challenged several times around the course, but they held their nerve and delivered a win, and it was very impressive.
Yeah, and there is nowhere to hide in SailGP. At least with the America's Cup, you can always blame it on the boat if you don't win a race. But with everyone sailing identical kit and the best gathering of the best in the world that I think maybe we've ever seen at the top of the sport, there are so many big names there. And Giles Scott with just 2 gold medals, he's not even one of the most decorated. And stepping into Sir Ben Ainslie's shoes to take the helm, yeah, you've got to feel the pressure of that. And well, Giles, even when he's winning, he doesn't really celebrate, does he? He's very, very calm and measured.
You're right. I mean, they're very big shoes to step into, and just in case anybody's wondering why we're spending so much time on this and why it's significant, because Giles is the second helmsman in the AC 75. So it's Ben on one side and Giles on the other side. So he's got to show that he can step up to the mark. And certainly when Ben stepped down from his SailGP team, or at least stepped down from being on board the boat, it was a struggle for Giles, to be frank. And he didn't get the results that he would want. But now he has. And that's, on the face of it, that's extremely good news for the team. But I just wonder, I mean, you'll know more about this than me in some ways, I suspect, Andy, but I just wonder whether Giles doing well has now put pressure on the team as to who they might select to drive the boat come the America's Cup, because so far we've just assumed that it's going to be Ben and Giles. But I just wonder, I mean, they've got Dylan Fletcher in their team, who is, I guess, in simple terms, his role is a coach, but he is extremely good at foiling as well. So I would imagine that Giles was may well have been feeling the pressure from him. I don't know. This is just my sort of homemade theory, but you know more about Dylan, I suspect, than me, having come from the Olympic circuit. I mean, what do you think, Dylan? Do you think Dylan would be capable of stepping up to the plate and jumping into an AC-75 and taking that role?
Yes, I absolutely think he would do. And Dylan is definitely very talented as a high performance boat sailor, being winner of the International Moth World Championship, the reigning Olympic champion in the 49er. He's got a more suitable background for this type of high speed racing than I would say Giles Scott has. But I mean, that said, Giles has obviously done quite a few years in foilers, and I hear he's pretty handy on the Moth as well, and that he's pretty darn good on the Moth as well. But I don't think he's had a chance to show that on the international circuit. But I think the more small hydrofoil experience you've got, wing foiling or kiteboarding or international moth sailing, the more valuable you are. And certainly that's what Nathan Outridge and Pete Burling both believe, and they're both form and Paul Goodison as well. All of them Olympic champions, but also just as relevant, all former world champions in the international moth. That does seem to be the training ground, and also Arno Saurophagis, the leading light in Alinghi Red Bull Racing. There's a lot of moth background in there, and Giles has some of that. But I mean, Giles, like Ben Ainslie, is best known for their background in the fin, which is still really hard to do. But it's a different style of sailing, different style of tactics, and I think those sailors are so dedicated that they are, you know, that they're building up their game. But I feel like Dylan Fletcher's background would make him a more automatic choice in the way that we've seen Rogero Tita, for example, do very well with the few opportunities he's had with Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think I mean, who knows? You know, we don't know what the conversations are within the team. At least I certainly don't. But it just made me wonder whether, you know, it'll be one of those strange situations where an embarrassment of talent and an embarrassment of ability is actually going to cause some quite tricky decisions. But we'll see. I mean, the next thing on the SailGP calendar, which comes up very soon, is New York. So, and that is notoriously fluky in New York and super shifty and really quite hard. So I guess Giles will be feeling the pressure to go and deliver it all over again. One thing I must say about that SailGP event was that the other thing that it made me wonder, or at least was interesting, was to see Tom Slingsby, the Australians, the dominant performance that they've delivered for so many seasons now. I mean, they capsized on the weekend, made a mistake there, and they weren't in the final. The Kiwis weren't in the final. It was a real sort of shake-up, and it's one of the things that I really like about SailGP, and I'm sure the top sailors absolutely hate it. But I love the fact that you can't stay at the top for that long because all your secrets are shared. You can go and ask the data center for the data on how someone is doing well, and then go out and train for that as well. So it's such a cool part of SailGP, and I think that Halifax just showed us what happens when people. Well, I'm not saying that the British Open was as a result of that, but it's certainly one of the aspects of SailGP that keeps that level really, really high.
Yeah, absolutely. That shared data is a key part of helping level the playing field. And well, talking about New York and how fluky that is, maybe its flukiness might be something that the US team might be looking forward to, because Taylor Canfield and his team, having taken over from Jimmy Spithill, they really need to get some performances on the scoreboard. It's been pretty embarrassing for them lately, and they don't get a lot of training time. This is the problem. Is
No.
you know that's the other issue is lack of actual time on the boat.
Absolutely, yeah. It's brutal. I mean, it's really weird, isn't it? On the one hand, you get everything you could possibly wish for when it comes to data. On the other hand, you get very little time to actually put it into practice because you turn up the event, and I can't remember exactly. I think it's 2 days they get. I think it's 2 days they get trained. That's not a lot of time to get to grips with one of those boats. But Anyway, whilst we're talking about New York, Andy, the other thing that sort of segues from into New York, or at least out of New York, was the New York Les Sables, the return transatlantic race for the IMOCAs. That's been really interesting as well, and that's well worth a look on the tracker to see what's going on there, because there's an extraordinary split in the fleet, completely different schools of thought there. But it's absolutely fascinating because these are not the conditions, the downwind conditions that they would normally have expected from this race. And given that there's so much focus on the results and the performance of the teams in this race ahead of the Vendée Globe, I just wonder how this is going to shake up the thinking, both from spectators from the outside, but possibly more importantly, the thinking within the teams. But it's a really interesting watch. And if you like watching a bit of tracker stuff, I strongly recommend it.
Well, Matt, I know that the D-Day brass band is coming along fairly soon. We better let you get rigged for that
Yes,
RS400
don't be
race.
late.
Yes. Anyway, good to catch up.
Yeah, you too.
Best of luck this evening out on the race
Thanks
course.
a lot.
See you next week.
See you later. Cheers.